The White House said his Middle East speech would make news, and President Obama sure did, on a key issue in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.
The United States believes that negotiations should result in two states with permanent Palestinian borders with Israel, Jordan, and Egypt, and permanent Israeli borders with Palestine. We believe the borders of Israel and Palestine should be based on the 1967 lines with mutually agreed swaps.
Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu immediately fired back, calling those borders indefensible. And not long after, he got on a plane and headed to Washington and the White House for some previously scheduled talks with President Obama. Joining us now, Congressman Eliot Engel of New York. Welcome, Congressman.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you for being with us. You're a Democrat. You've been a strong supporter of this president and of Israel. Did President Obama make a mistake when he called for Israel's return to pre-1967 borders?
Well, let me first say that I think the president said some positive things. He talked about Israel as a Jewish state, a Jewish homeland. He said the bond between the United States and Israel is unbreakable. I think those were very important things. But yes, I do think he made a mistake on the emphasis. Everyone knows that the 1967 lines are simply indefensible for Israel, and for the president to emphasize that, I think, was a very big mistake.
But Congressman, President Obama, I know he's the first president to formally take this stance, and it is tough, but nothing else has worked, so why not try a different tack? Why not be tough?
You know what works? It works when two parties sit down face to face and negotiate. When Israel and the Palestinians can sit down face to face. The Palestinians have been refusing to negotiate with Israel for months and months now, giving every kind of precondition before they'll even sit down and talk, whereas Israel says, let's sit down and talk. I think the president should have emphasized that. I think the president...
the two sides have sat down. They have talked over the decade. This has been going on forever. The two sides have talked, and still no peace.
Well, let's look at why there's no peace. Back in President Clinton's days, there was a deal done which would have given the Palestinians a state of their own. It would have given them 97% of the land on the West Bank, billions of dollars of foreign aid, and Arafat turned it down. The Israelis said yes. Ehud Olmert, who was the prime minister of Israel before Netanyahu, made very generous offers in terms of trying to get a final peace deal, and the Palestinians turned it down. And just a few weeks ago, the Palestinians made a deal which brought Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, into their government. I don't know how Israel negotiates with a group like Hamas, which calls for Israel's, says they're opposed to Israel's right to even exist. I mean, the United States, we didn't negotiate with Osama bin Laden, we just killed him. And the fact of the matter is that I don't know how Israel can sit down with a new government where you have Hamas, which we say in the United States is a terrorist organization.
You could argue that Israel has also aggravated the Palestinians by continuing to build settlements, on disputed land, and that has frayed the relationship as well. But I want to move on to this meeting between President Obama and Benjamin Netanyahu. It's bound to be tense. So what do you think the president should say to sort of mend fences?
Well, the president is also going to speak before AIPAC on Sunday, and I hope he emphasizes some of the good things, first of all, this administration has done with Israel in terms of Israel's security needs. I think he needs to emphasize the things that everybody knows, that those 1967 lines are not defensible, that having a state that's only 9 miles wide is not something that's sustainable. And I think he should show a willingness to sort of the Palestinian leadership to kind of prod them a bit. President Abbas has sounded anything but a moderate over the past several months and years. They are going to go to the UN and try to unilaterally get a state declared. They don't have Israel listed as a country in any of their school books or anything like that. They call for holy wars and refuse to do it. I mean, if there's ever going to be peace, there's got to be moderation on both sides. And for the president to emphasize differences with Israel, I think is a tactical mistake. I think the president has good in his heart. I'm a supporter of the president, but I do think that We ought to remember that Israel's our only ally in the Middle East, and the Palestinians have to decide. If they want a state, they're not going to get it on the backs of terrorism. They're going to get it by sitting side by side with Israel and negotiating. And let me just say this. The quartet in the United Nations, of which the U.S. is a part of, along with the European Union and Russia and the United Nations, say that Hamas must recognize Israel's right to exist, renounce terrorism, and abide by every previous agreement between Palestinians and Israelis. If the Hamas terrorists refuse to do that, how does Israel sit with a country that doesn't renounce terrorism, whose very existence is to wipe you out? I'm sure
all of that will be brought up in this White House meeting today. And Congressman, thank you so much for being with us this morning. I know how passionate you feel about this issue.
Well, thank you very much.